Okay, you are welcome to this lecture where we are now turning our attention to data collection methods, or what we call data collection tools. So of course we have, if you have been following my previous videos, we are moving systematically, and I started, of course, from the very basics, from the beginning, from the definitions of research, looking at the features, the characteristics of research, and moving systematically from step to step. We have looked at issues of problem identification. How do you identify a problem? We have looked at the formulation of research questions, formulation of research objectives. We have looked at literature review. We have looked at sampling techniques. We have looked at issues of methodology, which answers the how aspect. How will you carry this research? Now, in this lecture, we turn our attention to the data collection tools, or the instruments, because if you have moved through smoothly, you have written the introduction. You have with all its different subsections. And of course, I'm talking if you are following a traditional way of writing a dissertation or writing a thesis, and then you have written literature review, you have written the methodology section, and normally under the methodology section, you spell out the data collection methods and also the data collection tools. So this in this lecture, this is where we're going now to put our focus. What are these data collection methods? What are these data collection instruments? Now, the data collection method will dictate the data collection tools you will use in research. And for example, if you had, you used, let me say, focus group discussion as a method of data collection, then automatically, as a data collection tool, you'll have focus group discussion guides. If you used interviews as a method of data collection, then the data collection tool, you'll have interview guides. If you use the observation as a data collection tool method, then as a data collection tool, you'll have observation checklists, and so on and so forth. So we want to look at two types of data. When you go out to collect data for any research of your interest, any research that you are undertaking, you will always collect either primary data or secondary data. Now, what is primary data? Now, primary data is the data, the raw data that you directly get from the respondents. It is the raw data, the fresh data that you directly get from the respondents using any of the data collection methods, either using a questionnaire, you're using interview guides, focus group discussion guides, observation checklists. So it is that raw data you go and collect from the respondents. For example, you have face-to-face interviews based on a certain topic that you are conducting. You ask the respondents, they give you that information. So that fresh information, that raw information, is what we call primary data. And when we talk of the secondary data, we are talking of data that you get from the already published works. The data you can get, for example, from magazines, the data you can get from government reports, the data you can get from published research articles, from conference proceedings, from book chapters, from books. So that is what we call secondary data. Because from that data, you can also get it, synthesize it, analyze it, and you can write articles. What we call the reviews. You can write review papers out of the secondary data. Now, under this topic, of course, I have just started by giving those general introductions and definitions. We shall need to look at the types of data collection instruments. What are those types? How do you construct those data collection tools or instruments? For example, how do you formulate a questionnaire? How do you formulate an interview guide? How do you formulate an observation checklist? And so on and so forth. We shall look at the strengths and limitations of each of those methods. And then we shall also look at characteristics of good measures. Now, how to know the best data collection strategies? We are talking about the data collection methods that you can use either questionnaire, interviews, focus group discussions. You can use document analysis. You can use observation, and so on and so forth. So, how to know the best data collection strategy? How will you know that, no, I think for this research topic, this is the best data collection strategy. For this is the worst, therefore I will not use it. Now, we start by making a note that surely no one best way, but it will depend on, first of all, on what you need to know. So what we are saying that there is no best method for any research, but it will depend, first of all, on the kind of research that you are conducting. What do you need to know? Do you need to know the numbers? Do you need the stories? What do you need to do? To know will depend and will dictate the best method. Where the data resides, where are you going to get that data from? Are you getting it from the environment, from files, from people? Are you going to travel to get it from the community? Then resources. Resources in terms of money and time available at your disposal. Complexity of the data to be collected. How complex is that data? And the complexity will depend on the type of the research that you are conducting. Frequency of data collection. How often will you collect that data? Now, intended forms of data analysis. How are you going to analyze that data? First of all, what type of data? Is it qualitative data? Is it quantitative data? If it is quantitative data, what data analysis techniques are you going to use? Are you using descriptive statistics, or you are going to use inferential statistics? If you are using inferential statistics, what kind of inferential statistics are you going to use? Are you using independent t-tests? Are you using correlational? Are you using chi-square? Are you using regression analysis? And so on and so forth. So, what we are saying and what you need to understand as a researcher is that there might be no any best method for you, but it will depend on those number of aspects that we have highlighted. Now, guidelines for collecting data. One is that use multiple data collection methods. Now, here we say that you don't just use one data collection method, but you can use multiple data collection methods. Multiple data collection method means that if I have collected data, for example, from a first objective using a questionnaire, the second objective I can use interview. Or maybe the third objective I can use focus group discussions. When you use multiple data collection methods, it assists to compensate for the weaknesses of one method. Because as we shall be seeing on later on in the forthcoming lectures, each of these data collection methods have their own weaknesses. Now, use available data, but you need to know, first of all, how the measures were defined, how the data were collected and cleaned, the extent of missing data, how accuracy of the data was ensured, how was the accuracy ensured, and so on and so forth. So, data collection. You gather information, you answer questions, you evaluate outcomes, you test hypotheses. So the data will assist us to test the hypotheses. And when we test the hypothesis, then we make conclusions based on those hypotheses. Okay? Now, structured approach of collecting data. Now, what is this structured approach? Because we have the structured approach and the unstructured approach of collecting data. A researcher can use either structured approach or unstructured approach. Unstructured approach. Now, under the structured approach, it means that all data collected in the same way. If you have, for example, used phone interviews, then all that has been collected using phone interviews. If you have used face-to-face, one-on-one, then all data has been collected in that way. Now, especially important for multi-site and cluster evaluations, you can compare. Important when you need to make comparisons with the alternate interventions and so on. Now, when we talk of collecting data, of course, before you even come to the traditional ways of collecting data, we talked about the structured and the unstructured. Now, of course, when we talk of the unstructured approach of collecting data, it means that data collection is not following a systematic way. You are not following a systematic approach. And data is not collected in the same way. You can use phone interviews, you can use face-to-face, you can use the emails to send questionnaires, and so on and so forth. Now we talk of the traditional ways of finding out information. Now, in the past, where we are looking at the traditional ways of finding information, how would people find out things? You would find out things by talking to people, by discussing, by asking people to answer certain questions. The Socratic method of asking. Doing experiments, and from the experiments you get the answers. Going there and seeing by yourself and then ascertaining and then gathering that information and recording it down. And so on and so forth. But now, these are not the methods that we are using. Now, when do you use an unstructured approach? You use it when you need to address extent questions, have a larger sample or population, know what needs to be measured, need to show results numerically, and need to make comparison across different sites or interventions. Now, semi-structured approach of collecting data. Systematic and follow general procedures, but the data are not collected in exactly the same way every time. I've already talked about that. It's more open and fluid, does not follow a rigid script, may ask for more detail, people can tell you what they want in their own way. And then you'll be gathering that information. I can just come here without any questionnaire and what, but I have my questions in mind. I can start asking the respondents, they will give me information, I will note it down. So that is like the same structure there. You're not following a rigid, strict approach, you are following a questionnaire, one question after the other, and so on and so forth. Okay. So I think now we can take a break, and when we return, we shall pick on from here. Thank you so much.